And then we have, alright, I will talk about the structure after all. So here, this is the question 14.18 in the old textbook, and then the question 14.17 in the new textbook. So the question gives you some information about the firms, right? For the common equity, for the Jensen Act, this is the financial information, the cash relevant things. The question requires you to come up with a value to book ratio. So remember, the value to book ratio we learned is calculated based on this formula, right? 1 plus the ROCE minus RE multiplied with the growth in the book value of equity compared to BB0 and then over 1 plus RE power T. Okay? Right. In examination, please. Here you have 1, right? It means we take the BB0 over BB0 in the residual income. That's why we have 1 here. Don't forget 1. Sometimes you come up with the present value of this and then you just say that, okay, that is the value to book ratio. That will be wrong, okay? Why I would like to remind you that because students in my earlier previous examination, they make a lot of the similar mistake, and this is one of the most common mistake that you forget only the 1 here, right? Yeah, and then here, secondly, PBT minus 1 over PB0, but not PBT minus 1 over PBT minus 2. You compare the growth in the book value of equity to the PB0, not to the PB of the last year. You understand? Okay, so given that, now, first of all, what do? So to get the B0 over BB0, so we need a lot of components. So one by one, okay? Right, so we have the comprehensive income reported in the, in the information here, which is the net income. To be more correct, that would be the comprehensive income, right? And for the implied ROCE, what is it? Implied ROCE is when we take the comprehensive income over the beginning book value of equities. All right. So that is, here from the formula. Beginning book value of equity is computed based on, the tables, right? Here the common equity beginning of the year. Okay, so put it here for each year. Next, we will then compute what? Residual income. Residual income is, the comprehensive income minus the required income, and then required income ROCE. Residual ROCE equal to what? The implied ROCE or the comprehensive ROCE minus the required ROCE. Okay? So how can you get the number? Here you have the implied ROCE, which is the comprehensive ROCE. Then you minus the cost of equity. The cost of equity, which is also the required income, over the BB5, which is the beginning book value of equity. That just simply means you take the comprehensive ROCE and then you minus the cost of equity. This is the required ROCE. You understand? Okay, one by one. And after that, we compute the cumulative growth, which is this component. Cumulative growth, okay, equal to the book value of equity beginning over the BB0. Here, because I'm doing estimation for the current year, so the BB0 would be similarly, okay, to the BBT plus 1 beginning. But for the year 2, you see that I would then use the beginning, right, in year 2 over the BB0, which is the year plus 1. Next, for year 3, you see that I'm comparing the BB, okay, at the beginning of year plus 3 with the BB0, but not with the BB of last year. Please avoid that mistake, okay? Right, similarly for year plus 4, right, you see, I'm not comparing with last year PB, okay, but I'm comparing with the PB0 following our formula here. Alright, so after that, we come up with ROCE, which is the implied ROCE here, the residual income. Now we will need to calculate the present value of the residual ROCE using the present value factors. This is our formula. Alright? Just use the ROCE multiply with the growth, cumulative growth, and multiply with the present value factors. then you will have the present value for the value to book ratios each year. See that? Okay, do it similarly for year +1 to year +10. So you can get what is called the present value of residual or OCE time growth, which means this component of our formula. Alright? Next, the terminal value equal to what? Alright, so here the terminal value simply means that from year 11, the cumulative growth is this, okay, similarly. And with the present value factors, you can come up with the terminal value following what? The residual ROCE multiplied with the cumulative growth and then power like over the cost of equity, right? Minus the long-term growth assumption for the discount factor. Okay? So you get the terminal one. Now the present value of this is when you take, the terminal over, the 1 plus the discount rate power with 10, or you multiply with, the discount factor I have calculated earlier. You see? Okay. Now you plug all of them to get the present value of the residual ROCE time growth. Time growth, okay? You see time growth? We time the growth in the book value of equities. So this is total present value equal the planning plus the terminals. Okay? Now, don't forget that we need to add 1. Add 1. You see 1 here? Okay, and then we get the sum. Now we need to adjust for mid-year discounting in case the question require you. Okay, sometimes the question does not require you to do so. You can ignore. So this is how we determine the implied book value to book ratio, which is the V0 over VP0. Okay, now to get the present value of equity for the firm or estimated equity value, what do? Alright, we have the VV0 in our questions, so we can get the V0 easily by taking that ratios and multiply with VV0. This is how we get the estimated equity value. Step by step, okay? Right? And after that, we determine the other ratio, which is needed for our conclusion whether the share price is undervalued or overvalued. Maybe we compare what? The value to book ratio with the market to book ratio, as I acknowledged to you, or the value to earning ratio with the price to earning ratio to conclude about the firm's share price. Okay? Then for the C, the question requires you to do the same, but here, compute the risk neutral value. It means that apply the price differential technique here. So for the C, you are using the same, calculation step, but you wouldn't replace the required cost of equity by the risk-free rate. Okay? Instead of using the cost of equity, you would then use the risk-free rate to be the cost of equity, and repeat the calculations. Okay? Here, we repeat the calculation. At the end, we can determine the risk-neutral value of common shareholder equity to be this. This is the value of the firm without the risk. Okay, the firm equity without the risk. Now, you compare with the earlier calculation. What do you see? Here, right? And then you can also compare with the current value of the firms in the market. So, for the market value of the firm equities, in our question, this is equal to 309. Okay, 309. But from our risk neutral value calculations, the firm without risk is up to 3,000. So it means the market has discounted your firm by 90%, given the risk. It's too large, right? You cannot compute, like conclude immediately. But whether it's too large or too small, you compare with the level of risk of your firms. But here, what we can conclude is that the market has discounted this company share roughly 90% below its risk neutral value. It's too much. Okay? Right? So now, there's another thing is that now the analysts, they want to see what is the market assumption. Why they come up with this, over discounting the share of the state-owned company. So given that, the question number D requires you to use reverse engineering. Okay? Reverse engineering is that you would then set your assumption equal to the market assumption, and then to solve for the growth rate here. So to show for the loan growth rate, in this case, we need to make sure that our calculation, which means this one, equal to the market assumption about the firm, which means that 309. Okay, you said, you know what you have computed here, equal to 309. Okay, so now you work back to find out the growth. You understand? Okay, in which part of the formula do we have the growth? The first part or the second part? I told you before, right? In the first part, we are talking about the planning period. We all have the numbers. We don't have the growth here. So this is not the planning part. But the thing happened with the terminal part is that you see, in our calculation for the terminal value, we need to take the cost of equity minus the growth. So we need to work back step by step, okay, to find out what is actually growth. So here, first of all, students, here I'm showing you the step-by-step calculation for you to see clearly what happened, okay? So first, we set the market value. We work back, okay, it means we adjust for mid-year discounting. So instead of multiply, now we need to divide to get the market value if assuming that full year discounting. Okay, so the market value assuming full year discounting equal to the planning period and the terminal period. Now you need to get rid of the planning period to get the terminal one because that is where we find the growth. You understand? Okay, so next, we need to less the book value equity first. Agree, because in our formula it's not just only we have this and this, we also have the one here. Right? So I'm using the residual income model to show you. We less the book value equity. We less the present value of the planning residual income. Okay? And what we have after all would be the present value of the terminal. Okay? Of the terminal value. Right? Remember, the present value of the terminal value is mean that today. So to get the terminal value, you need to take that and then adjust for the discount factors. Alright? So after all, you get the present value of the terminal value but at year 11. Okay? I mean that at the end of the planning period. You understand the process? Alright, so now how can we find the growth? So let me, can you see this? Let me zoom in, please. So this is exactly the formula for us to find the growth, right? So this is the present value of the terminal value at the end of the planning period, which is year plus 11. Now it's equal to what? The residual income. Oh no, this is the comprehensive income. Multiply with 1 plus the growth. Minus what? Required income. Required income equal to what? The cost of equity multiply with the beginning book value of equities for that period. You will get what? The residual income. Okay? Over the cost of equity minus the G. That's exactly what we do for the terminal value, right? Then set it equal to this 28. So for the G, if so, okay, you can get the implied growth rate of the market to be negative 14.43. So the market is making this assumption, student. The market assumes that the growth in our formula is now negative. Okay, but here you can see that the market is now actually undervaluing the share of your company by having this assumption. But from your analysis of the company, you can see that it contracts with the projected positive growth in the residual income of the company from year 11 to year 10. Right? And then even a higher growth rate during the last few years of the forecasting horizons. You are having a totally different assumption in terms of growth as compared to the market. Okay, so this is how you find out the implied growth rate from the market assumption using reverse engineer. Okay, right, so this type of question will surely